people from very exciting to be here to see so many people from different countries all around the world. So let's get started straight away. What I'm going to do is give you a rundown of the changes to the Cambridge English First exam, First Certificate. First slide, and really the first change. Here are the 4 papers which will be in the new exam. Reading and use of English, writing, listening and speaking. And as you can see there, reading and use of English have been put together as they are in advanced and proficiency into the same paper. So 4 papers instead of 5. And they're no longer called paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. It's just the reading and use of English paper, writing paper and so on. Now what we do is we take each of those papers in turn, show you what the changes are, if there are any changes, and then, as I say, I'll be looking at some ideas that you could use with students. The ideas, unashamedly, are taken from the new edition of Ready for First, which is already out. That's what I've been working on over the last couple of years, and understandably the ideas that I'm going to be telling you I've incorporated into Ready for First. So they'll be taken from that book. Now let's start with reading and use of English. The time of that paper, timing is 1 hour 15 minutes. In the square brackets in the next few slides, the square brackets are the times for the old paper, or rather the current paper. Let me just kind of, to avoid confusion, let me talk about the new exam and the old exam, okay? And the old exam is actually the exam you're preparing at the moment for 2014. The new exam is the 2015. So in the old exam you had 45 minutes for use of English and 1 hour for reading, and now it's been shortened by 30 minutes and you have 1 hour 15 minutes for both parts of the paper. Here's the use of English. The tasks in this paper are exactly the same. Use of English are parts 1 to 4, and parts 1 to 3 are multiple choice close, open, close, word formation, and in each of those parts there are 8 questions. And in the square brackets it says, well, there were 12 for parts 1 and 2 and 10 questions for the word formation. But now there are 8 questions in all of those and 6 questions, not 8, in the keyword transformations. And then the reading, same story in the reading, exactly the same tasks, but fewer questions. So 6, 6 and 10 as opposed to 8, 7 and 15. And that's how Cambridge have managed to shave off half an hour from the time of those 2 papers combined. And we'll be looking at that one last of all, because there really are no changes in the task. What you're doing at the moment to prepare your students is of course also valid for what you'll be doing for 2015 and beyond. And writing. Now writing, there is a change, a big change there in the part 1 compulsory task. As you can see on the left, it's now an essay, whereas on the right in the old exam it's letter or email. And the word number has changed as well, 140 to 190 as opposed to 120 to 150. The essay in part 1 is the same as the advanced exam and the proficiency exam, so Cambridge have obviously brought it in line with the other 2 exams above it in terms of level. Part 2 changed there as well. On the left are the new tasks, article, email, letter, report, review. Two have been taken out. Understandably, the essay is no longer in part 2, but also the story has been taken out. If you're doing the normal first exam, you won't be asked to write a story. That, however, has moved to the First for Schools exam. So if you're preparing for First for Schools, then your students could write a story in the exam. They could also study the set text and write an answer to the set text option. So, normal paper, essay, plus those 4 tasks on the left. If you're preparing for schools version, then story instead of report. I didn't say that, but if you're preparing for schools, the report goes and it's story in its place, plus the set text option. Listening, essentially no change to parts 1, 2 and 4, which I've labelled there: multiple choice, sentence completion, multiple choice. If you know those tasks, essentially no change, a few rubric changes, and in part 2, it's a monologue, no longer a dialogue possible there, so always monologues. But really this doesn't affect the way we teach or the way students approach these tasks. I'm just going to turn my microphone up a little bit just in case people are having problems. I hope that's okay. Let's just check the yes button. Are you hearing okay? If you could press your yes buttons or the tick buttons. Lots of yeses coming in. Thanks very much. Okay, that's good. Great. What has changed in the listening paper, though, is part 3, but only slightly, really. It's the same task, essentially. There are still 5 speakers, and there are still 5 questions, and each speaker speaks for about 30 seconds. But instead of 6 options, as in the current or the old exam, there will be 8 options. So slightly more challenging because there are now 3 distractors rather than just 1. And finally, or rather firstly, because this is the one we're going to look at first, the speaking paper, essentially no change to parts 1, 2 and 4. That's the personal questions, the comparing the photos, and part 4, the discussion questions. But yes, there is a change to part 3, the collaborative task. What are the changes? Well, it's now a diagram, not a visual. It's rather badly expressed, I'm afraid. Perhaps I should say diagrams, not illustrations or photos. There are no illustrations or photos. It's a simple kind of spider diagram, which I'll show you in a minute. And it's broken down into 2 parts. Whereas at the moment it's a 3-minute collaborative task, it's now broken into 2 minutes and 1 minute. Let's have a look at an example. Here's an example coming up. Now, if you can ignore the kind of stuff at the top and the questions at the bottom, really what students get is that diagram, that rather bland diagram there with sorry, I'm getting bells ringing. Not sure if I'm supposed to do anything at the moment. I'll just carry on regardless. There's a question in the middle and prompts around the outside. 5 prompts in lozenges around the outside. That's what it looks like. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute because we're going to see a couple of people performing that task, or part of that task anyway. Here's another example which I'm going to use as an example of kind of things you could do, the kind of language you could input for this task. Now, this is from Ready for First. As you can see, there are illustrations there. I just said there aren't illustrations, and indeed there aren't in the exam. We've used illustrations to decorate here. Otherwise the book would be very drab if it didn't have some colour. So there are illustrations here, but you can see there that the lozenges, a school, the local history museum, a sports centre, etc., would stand up on their own without an illustration. It's purely there for decorative purposes. So let's have a look at the task at the top, and then we'll talk about the language that you could deal with here. Imagine that a wealthy donor wants to give away large sums of money to different institutions and other places in your community. Below are some of the possible recipients of the donations, and then talk to each other about how these different recipients could spend their donations. And there you have the question in the box, in the central lozenge. How could these different recipients spend their donations? Now let's come down to the useful language box. Some of this is very task specific, but we can also pick out some general points for it. First problem is this first task lasts for 2 minutes. Let's just talk you through the whole thing. That's 2 minutes, and then after they've done that, talking about the different options, then the examiner, the interlocutor, stops them and says, "Now decide which two donations would benefit the community most," and they have 1 minute to do that. So the 2 tasks, first task 2 minutes, second task 1 minute. Task 1 in the useful language box, you've got a little exercise there on providing alternatives for the word spend, which is in the question. Some of you may know that once the interlocutor gives a question and includes language like spend their donations, candidates often repeat that word time and time again without looking for alternatives. So to avoid that and to give a kind of range of language, there's an exercise there which encourages that. So the first one, they could spend it on computers. One idea would be to invest in new equipment, pay for advertising and so on. And the idea behind this is, the general point behind this is that to help students, or to give students a language, the tools, so that they don't repeat the word in the question all the time. That's the general point there. B says question tags in the useful language box on the left near the bottom. Now, part of the marking criteria for the speaking exam is interactive communication, where students are giving and also asking each other for their opinion. And of course there are the usual exponents like what's your opinion, do you agree, what do you think? But also question tags would be useful here. So looking at the example, number 1 there in B, that's not a bad idea, is it? That would be useful, wouldn't it? And so on. And using those question tags, which is a difficult area of language, a complex grammatical form in the language of Cambridge, then they could also encourage each other to contribute to the conversation. So that's a task which can be applied to all Part 3s. Now, task 2 in the useful language box on the right, this is a new area of language which we can include here. Because the second task, which in this case is now decide which 2 donations would benefit the community most, is dealt separately, what students could do is refer back to what they've been talking about in the first part of the task. So for example here, as I said before, schools never have enough computers, or you made a good point earlier about the health benefits of sport, or we both agreed before on the importance of, and so on. Any exponent which refers back to the first part of the task, the 2 minutes where they were talking together, would show that they've been listening to what they've been saying. That's good interactive communication, and would also help them to include some good language, some good exponents to show that. Such as these here. So that's a very new area for the exam, a new area of language to consider when preparing students for the second task of Part 3. And then finally at the bottom, comparing the different options, decide which donations would benefit the community most. There's a chance there for students to compare each of those options and use the language of comparisons, both comparatives and superlatives. And there's a few given there. A museum, for example, wouldn't need financial help as much as a school, and so on and so forth. Many possibilities there, but it's something you can pass on to your students, that the language of comparison, this is a good opportunity to show what they know in that area. Now, I'll go back to the other task then. This is the one I showed you at the beginning with no illustrations here. This is where there's a museum, a history museum wants to attract new visitors. And the question is, what type, in the center of the spider diagram there, what type of people would these different ideas appeal to? And once again, applying that general rule, students might use the word appeal to over and over again. Let's try and give them alternatives, and that's what the useful language box does there. This might appeal to, are likely to find this interesting, this might bring in a lot of young families. And on the right, this would be suitable, ideal, enjoyable, good fun for children, and this would attract people and so on. So what we're doing there is what you can do when you're preparing for this first part of the task, is to think about the wording of the question and provide alternative lexis and structures which will enable students to stop repeating themselves. And then after that, in exercise 2, right at the bottom of the page there, you'll see now you have about a minute to decide which 2 ideas would be most successful in attracting new visitors. Which 2 ideas would be most successful? So language of comparisons could come in again, that referring back to task 1 as well. Now, I'm going to show you a script of 2 people, Christina and Paolo, who have performed this task, and we're going to listen to them perform. I hope it comes across. I have to put it on my laptop. It's on the laptop here. It's actually, I don't know if we can see them there. Yeah, they're not so well, maybe. Let's see if I can get that in the shot. Yeah, that's coming in a bit now. Okay, right. What we're going to do is listen to them. I've highlighted some language in this. This is task 2. Okay, this is the 1-minute task, and I've highlighted some language. In red is that language where they're avoiding repeating the same words. And the language in blue is where they refer back to what they've said in the previous part of the task, the 2-minute task. So I'll put it on. You can follow, listen and follow. But the main thing is to listen. If you can't see that very well, it doesn't matter too much, but the important thing is that you can hear what's going on. I'm going to put the microphone right next to some speakers and hope that you can hear that okay.
Thanks. Now you have about a minute to decide which 2 ideas would be most successful in attracting new visitors.
Right, well, I think Paula made a good point earlier that the museum must appeal to as many different types of people as possible. And I think we both agreed that the medieval fair would attract people of all ages. So, Paolo, do you agree that that might be one of the best 2 choices?
Yes, I do. I think it doesn't matter if you're on your own, in a couple, with friends, in a family. Everyone would enjoy it. And I'm sure it would bring in many visitors to the museum. I think this is also true for the computer exhibition, but you don't agree, I think.
No, I'm sorry. I know you like computers, but I would be bored. People have enough of computers at work. As I said before, I think nearly everyone will like the dressing up. Not you, maybe, but if the museum wants to attract more visitors, it needs to have more fun activities, not more exhibitions.
Okay, so we don't agree on that, but we did both agree before that if the theatrical representations were funny and not serious, then that would be very successful.
Yes, that's true. I think that...
Thank you.
Okay, so there was a minute. I hope you could hear that okay. Oh, that was a minute. I hope you could hear that okay. Could you just tick if you heard that okay, the recording there? Yeah, okay, good, thanks. Right, so the main point there then, it's very specific to this task, but the main point is very general, this idea of referring back. These are some exponents that I've suggested, the ones in blue, but of course there are many more that you could include. Some kind of acknowledgement to the examiner that you've listened to each other in the first 2 minutes. Well worth thinking about for the new exam. Okay, let's move on from speaking to listening. And listening, as I said before, the only real change there is to, I'm just going to turn the microphone up a little bit, see if that's okay. The only real change there is to part 3 where there are 8 options, not 6 as before. So let's have a look at an example of that. Again, this is you can see examples on the Cambridge Literature. If you go to the Cambridge website, you'll see one there. This is one from Ready for First. If you look in the center of the page there, you'll see options A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, whereas before it was just A to F. But there's still 5 speakers. So really, not much has changed here in terms of how we prepare students. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just on the ideas that I have and that you can use for preparing students for this particular listening task, even though essentially really it hasn't changed a great deal. In the How to Go About It box, there's an instruction there, underline the keywords and phrases in the 8 options. This is probably something you do already, or I encourage your students to do already. But then the next sentence says, the first one has been done for you. However, if you hear one of these words or phrases, do not assume that the option which contains them is the answer. So the underlining of keywords is really to focus students on the content of the option, but they should be very, very be aware of choosing an option simply because one of those words is mentioned in the listening. In fact, often when the word is mentioned, it's not the answer. But we can't make that point as a definite. But certainly beware of word spotting, as this is called. In exercise 2, Check your answers using the listening script on pages whatever. Underline those parts of each extract which guide you to the correct answers. So focusing on the script, looking at how the correct answer was arrived at, but also in exercise 3, looking at why people might choose the wrong answer. So, for example, in exercise 3, it says one student wrote the following incorrect answers, and for number 1, they wrote D. Now, the instruction is identify the language in each extract which may have caused the student to choose the wrong answer. Now, number 1, whatever the answer is, in the example, the wrong language, the language which could have caused that student to incorrectly choose D, is perhaps I should have spoken out at the consultation meeting. If you see that in exercise 3 there. And if you go to option D, it says we should have been consulted about the change. Now, there's some similarities between the two utterances or two sentences, but they don't say the same thing. They say very different things. We should have been consulted, I should have spoken out at the consultation meeting, are two very different things. But this is the language which might have caused that student to put the wrong answer. So focusing not only on where the correct answer is, but also where the wrong answer is, looking at the tape script. And this indeed is what Cambridge recommend. Here's a quote, an extract from the Cambridge Handbook, which says students could practice doing the exercise with the tape script so that they can see the kind of matching required. Well, personally, I'm in favour more of getting them to do the exercise first, then looking at the tape script to see firstly where the right answer is and then where the wrong answer is. Focusing on distraction. What Cambridge also say for this task is this. Other relevant exercises would be any which practice saying the same thing in a different way. Any which practice saying the same thing in a different way. Paraphrasing. Why? Why is this useful? Well, of course, the words in the options are often very, very different to the words which are spoken by the speakers in speakers 1 to 5. So they're saying the same thing but in a different way. So any exercise which practice is that for students is good preparation for part 3 multiple matching. Here's an example of that. If I can guide you through this, the listening task is right at the bottom, but if you go to the top and the second paragraph which begins the speakers, so I think I've got can I use this? Oh yeah, there it is. The speakers will not use exactly the same words that appear in options A to H. When you read each one, therefore, think of other ways of saying the same thing. Underlining keywords may help, but do not choose an answer simply because you hear the words, keywords. So underlining, yes, but also get them to think about the kind of things they might hear in the listening. I can't get rid of that now. There we go. Right. So, for example, A says the option that they're given is I will need a specific qualification to do this job. What might they hear in the listening? Well, they might hear something, for example, I've got to pass some exams, I've been advised to do a college course, I'll have to study for a degree, and so on. If we go down to the bottom, to the actual options here, then you'll see the next one, B, I currently combine work with studying. So perhaps they'll say something like, well, I've got a job during the day, during the evening I work in a bar, and during the day I have to go to college. In C, I disagree with the careers advice I've been given. So perhaps, well, somebody suggested I become or whatever, but I think that's nonsense. I don't think I'm suited for that kind of work. Okay, and so on and so forth. Now, this they do before they listen. Of course, in the exam, they only have 30 seconds to read through these options. And some of you will be saying, well, they haven't got time to do all that. No, they haven't perhaps got time to do it in great detail, but that's why training in the classroom is so important, getting them to predict what they might hear before the listening, to get them into the right mindset, the right frame of mind for performing this kind of task. And actually, the more they do this kind of thing, the better they get, the faster they get, and they'll be able to read through each of the options and at least give some kind of thought to the fact that it might be said in a different way and how it might be said. The more practice they get, the better. But even if they don't do it quickly in the exam, at least in the classroom they have an idea of, they get behind the task, they get to understand what's involved in the task, that actually what they hear is different to what they read. Now, Cambridge did say any exercise which looks at different ways of saying things in different ways. Now that's useful for multiple matching in the listening, but it's also useful throughout the exam. This idea of paraphrasing and saying things in different ways is relevant to nearly all of the papers. In the listening paper we said multiple matching, but also in multiple choice. And if I can quote here from the Cambridge Handbook, Cambridge tell us that the questions either rephrase, report or summarise the ideas being expressed. So multiple choice questions, both in the listening and the reading, may be rephrasing what's being said or what they're reading. So there is another practical application of paraphrasing, another reason for practicing paraphrasing. I'll come on to the reading text that I've got on the PowerPoint in a minute and to why it's there. For the speaking as well, in the speaking paper, Cambridge tells us to train students to paraphrase when they do not know or cannot remember a word. So paraphrasing is useful in the speaking paper as well. It's also useful, of course, in the use of English paper where it's tested directly in the keyword transformations. So reading, listening, multiple choice, multiple matching, speaking, and use of English, paraphrasing is useful for all of those. So here's an idea which is in Ready for First, but you can apply this to any text as a way of practicing paraphrasing. Here's a reading. So students would do the pre-reading task, do the multiple choice questions, the post-reading, the discussion afterwards. And then a good idea for this text and any text is to get students to focus on the language that's in the text. And if you're followers of the lexical approach, you'll know one way is to notice language, to look for groups, chunks of language, groups of words, and not just individual words. And this is advice given by Cambridge, and it's the desired washback effect of the exam, to get students to look for groups of words. So here's a paragraph from that text. I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to read that, and then I'll start. And as you read it, can you think of, can you look for groups of words that might be useful to focus on for students, or interesting, useful to focus on? For example, let's do an example first. Right and Wrong Limited's offices are light and spacious, and there are no ashtrays in sight on any of the dozen or so desks. Well, there's some interesting stuff there. Light and spacious, a nice combination of adjectives for describing rooms. There are no whatever in sight. There are no in sight. Have a look at the rest, and I'll have a breather and a drink of water, and you can look for other groups of words. I'll just ask a question to Henry. I keep hearing a bell ringing. Can I ignore that? If you just give me a message on the chat, then I'll know if I'm supposed to be doing something or not. I keep having a bell ringing, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, if indeed anything. Right. Okay. Is that Henry coming in? No? Okay. Right, here's some groups of words in this text which might be useful to focus on. There are no in sight, free of paper, give the place a busy feel, with a note of irritation in her voice, are mostly to blame for, contrary to popular belief, and work strictly within the law. Perhaps you spotted some of those yourselves. If you're not sure on what language do I look for, well, a good tip is to ask students to look for nouns because because nouns are the main content-bearing words, the ones which express most meaning, and they're often accompanied by adjectives and verbs. So, for example, give the place a busy feel. Feel there is a noun. Busy is the adjective, of course. Give the place a busy feel. And there's irritation in her voice and nouns in there. Mostly to blame for no nouns. It's not an absolute, but it's a useful tip to give your students looking for nouns there. Now, here's the exercise which appears in Ready for First, which encourages students to paraphrase and record. Both of those very important skills for the old and the new Cambridge English First exam. First one is a gap fill, exercise 1. The second one is a bit more less guided practice. Now, here's exercise 1. I'll focus on just 4 of the elements. Number 1, I cannot see any ashtrays. What's happening here is that I've given a paraphrase for one of the sentences in the text. So I cannot see any ashtrays. Students complete the gaps with one word from the text. So there are no ashtrays in sight. Okay? Again, our reputation is the fault of cinema and TV. A paraphrase of one of the sentences in the text. Cinema and TV are to blame for our reputation. And you can see there the line number, that's where it appears in the text. Students do this without looking at the text. When they've done them all and worked through them, then they can check their answers and refer back to the text there. Next one, the day-to-day work is often far from stimulating. And the last one, a phrasal verb. A single case will often cost thousands of pounds. The cost of a single case will often run into thousands of pounds. Again, they may not know it, they may not remember this language, they may not have focused on it, but they've got the support of the text to go back to. They also end up with some useful word groups, which are highlighted in bold, with a paraphrase. And the ideal would be for them to record both of them, both sentences, which offer alternative ways of expressing the same thing, which is what we want in this activity. And then they get a bit more less guided practice. Paraphrase the following sentences on your own this time from the reading text and record both sentences in your vocabulary notebook. You do not need to change every word in the sentence. So here's an example. The desks are free of paper could be something like, there is no paper on the desks. They can repeat words. It's just expressing the same thing in a different way. And they're told to record both those sentences. So we're encouraging good practice here. We're encouraging noticing language, which you can do with all texts. We're encouraging paraphrasing, and we're encouraging recording of those groups of words in the context in which they originally appeared, because context is such an important, such a strong aid to memory. Okay, and as I said before, useful for many papers. And there it is again, there's the task there. The gap fill and then the freer, less guided practice below. Right, okay, now the writing paper. As I said before, the essay is the main change there, apart from one or two changes to part 2 about what's in and what's out. But really the one we want to be looking at here is the essay. What does it involve? What does it look like? Well, here's an example. This is from Ready for First. The rubric. You've recently had a discussion in your English class about whatever, and that's a very typical rubric. Now your English teacher has asked you to write an essay. Write an essay using all your notes. And then you're given an essay question. In this case, is it better to go shopping in small local businesses or large out-of-town shopping centres? And then you're given 3 notes. Write about. You're told what to write about, where things are cheaper, where the service is better, and then always you have to provide another area to talk about. So another idea. Your own idea. So clearly, what students are going to want is some help about other ideas they can talk about. The main areas that students have problems with in writing, I find, is ideas in the first instance, and secondly the language to use. There are other areas, of course, which we'll look at in a minute. Here's another example, and we'll focus on this one as a couple of ideas for preparing students. Is it better to watch a film at home rather than in a cinema? Do you agree? Write about which is more comfortable, better atmosphere, and then your own idea. So we need help. They need help. You can brainstorm in the class some other ideas before they go away and write it. Here's an example of that. Before you write your answer, make sure you plan what you're going to say. Decide what your own idea will be. Now, in the course book, we can offer some ideas. You can maybe think of some more, which is cheaper, which offers better quality viewing, and so on. So that's the first thing that obviously is not going to cause problems, but first thing we need to focus on with this new task type in the exam. The second thing would be, as it is at the moment, structure. Ideas and then structure. For essays, as now, a couple of possible structures. The typical balanced essay, where you have a general statement in paragraph 1, where both have advantages. General statement about the two options, and then the next paragraph giving the advantages of one, and in the next one the advantages of the other. And then finally in the last paragraph stating your opinion, reaching your conclusion. The other possible option is the one-sided, what's often called the one-sided argument, where you give your opinion right from the word go, and then paragraphs 2, 3 and 4 give 3 reasons why it's better to watch here, in this case a film in a cinema, and then finally in the last paragraph restating your opinion. So what all the things that apply to essays at the moment apply to essays in the new exam. It's simply presented in a different format. I think really that's the message to get across to students. Everything you need for essays at the moment, ideas, language, register, linking words, organisation, cohesion and so on, it applies to essays. What applies now will also apply in the new exam. It's just presented in a different way. In Ready for First, we now have a writing bank which gives examples of each of the different writing types. I'll just talk you through this very quickly. At the top you have the essay question. In the middle you have a model which points out the structure, the organisation. On the right hand side you can perhaps see there sorry, I'm looking for my... Yep, there we go. The appropriately formal style, so looking at register, looking at use of linking words and phrases for cohesive devices, useful language there, so language, cohesion, register, structure over here, and at the bottom, and ideas really, because this one gives you an ideas on how to write your essay, and then at the bottom you get another essay question, a different essay question, for students to do themselves, having looked at the model. Okay, and then that's the first one. The second one, the other type of essay, which we've just mentioned, the one-sided. Again, looking at register, looking at cohesion, articles, task at the top, model in the middle, help and pointers in the middle as well, and then at the bottom, useful language, and then another question for students to do. Email and letter, report, and review. Yeah, so those really are the essentially the tasks that students have to perform. Okay, that was writing. My natural tendency is to ask if anyone has any questions, but I'll move on and ask you if you have any questions towards the end. We're nearly there. This is the last one I'm going to look at, and really there's nothing new to say here at all. As I said before, the tasks are shorter. It's 1 hour 15 instead of what was previously 1 hour and 45. So you've got exactly the same tasks, and the same things apply to those tasks as what you're doing at the moment. I just thought I'd make one point about the use of English tasks, and that is the fact that each of the 4 tasks contains an element of lexis and grammar. Often people think, well, multiple choice close, that's vocabulary. Open close, that's grammar. Word formation, that's vocabulary. Well, no, all of the tasks include an element of lexis and grammar. How does that happen? Let's have a look. Here's the multiple choice close. Often the grammar is the choice of the option, the correct option, depends on the verb form which follows. So here, her doctor her to eat less. Said her to eat less? No. Suggested her to eat less? No. Advised her to eat less? Yes, because of the verb form which follows. Or in the next one, his careless driving almost led, caused, resulted, created, well, resulted in because of the preposition which follows. So here's grammar coming into what many people consider to be just a vocabulary exercise. No, it's both together. So any exercise you do, any awareness-raising exercise you do with your students, which shows them this feature, will forewarn them before they do this kind of task. You could get them, for example, you could take a past paper and get them to write their own distractors, their own wrong answers, having first shown them how this grammar aspect works in the multiple choice close. Open close, here's a few examples of where lexis comes in, not just grammar. So the incident took place on Friday night, part of a fixed group of words take place. So far no one has owned up to. It's a piece of lexis, it's an item of lexis, a phrasal verb with an element of grammar. We need a preposition in there. Which preposition do we need? So grammar and lexis together. And finally, no one has owned up to breaking the window, but we think we know who did it. A linking word, a conjunction, which is a lexical item which introduces a subordinate clause there. So grammar and lexis together. Word formation, yes, it is vocabulary, but it's also grammar. We need to have an understanding of the structure of the language to know what word class is required there. So the first one is becoming increasingly difficult. We need to know that adverbs are often used together with adjectives, and in this particular group of words to become adverb adjective for young people to find work. And then the next one, rising prices have forced consumers to, what is that to? Is it a preposition or is it part of an infinitive? I need to know that forced to is followed by an infinitive, so not forced to tightening, as in look forward to tightening, but forced to tighten. So some awareness of structure is required, and getting students to consider firstly the word class that's required before they decide on the actual form of that word. And then finally, keyword transformations. This is an interesting one to look at, this particular one. He fell over because he wasn't looking where he was going. This is based on an actual past paper transformation. If he had been paying attention to where he was going, he wouldn't have fallen over. Obviously a conditional, third conditional, call it what you will, but also a strong element of lexis, paying attention, if he had been paying attention to. So grammar and lexis coming in together, and all the activities we looked at, or the activity we looked at before about paraphrasing is very, very good practice for this, particularly at text level, because in text level you get this context, you get lexis and grammar together. And that really is a run through of the new exam with a few ideas as to what you can do. Not massive changes. If you want to find out more or more at your leisure and see more details of the exam, have a look at the Cambridge English website, particularly the very, very useful teacher support page. I'm sure when the new exam comes out, Cambridge will be providing some preparation activities of their own for the new task, the writing task, the speaking task in particular. Some very, very useful ideas that they give there, and also teachers like yourself give, so people sharing their own ideas as to how to prepare for those different areas. At the moment it will be focused on the current exam, the old exam, but when the new exam comes out there'll be some ideas there, I'm sure. And also, if you want to have a look further at Ready for First, then there's the link for Ready for First third edition, and there are some sample units you can look at to see what it looks like. Right, that's me. That's 40 minutes. So really, I think now it's over to you. If there are any questions you'd like to ask, and I'm sure if Henry's going to give me some questions, or if I'm going to. Oh, thank you. Good. My pleasure. It's been an amazing experience, actually. So I'd love to be able to see you all. But thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, Roy. Seeing as we've got a couple of minutes, I thought maybe we could just ask people if they want to type some questions in the chat box, and then we can try and answer them that way. I can see one there actually at the
moment which says why Cambridge don't give back the exams. I think it'd be, firstly, be an organisational nightmare for them to do that, and they probably increase the cost of the exam, which people don't want. In fact, I think people. Part of this is reducing the cost of the exam as much as possible. In Cambridge, I've got a product to sell, an exam, which they want people to take, and anything which increased costs will put people off. So I think that's partly the reason why they don't give back exams. The organisation, very, very difficult to do, I would imagine. I can't speak for Cambridge. I'm not employed by Cambridge, so I don't know. I can't really answer questions about Cambridge and how they work. That's really for them. When next time you, or for their website, perhaps you can ask questions to them. All I can really do is perhaps questions about ideas or anything related to them, but not from a Cambridge perspective. Let's have a look. So what have I got? Let's have a look. Is the exam more difficult than the one now? No, it's not more difficult. I think really I've shown that it's not a great deal. Perhaps that part 3 speaking makes the extra distractors makes it more challenging, yes, but the level of the exam will be the same. We're still talking about a B2 exam. So no, the exam is not more difficult. Scroll down. So students would only need to know essay writing. No, not at all. They have to, maybe that's not made clear. Part 1 is the compulsory task. Part 2 is they choose one of those options. So they have to know all the writing types we've looked at. They have to know each of those writing types to be prepared for the exam. They have, if you don't know the exam, the person is asking there, Part 1 is the compulsory task. Part 2, they have a choice of 3 tasks. On the day, and as I said, it was email, letter, report, article, and another one which I can't think of at the moment. Review, that was it, and they choose one of those 3 that they're given. So no, essay writing alone is not enough. What has been the idea behind these changes? You'd have to ask Cambridge that, but I think the idea, from what I know, the idea is to bring all the exams on what was previously called the upper main suite into line. So if you now compare first with advanced, the CAE exam, which is called advanced, with proficiency, you'll see that they follow a very, very similar format, similar task types all the way across the board. So to bring them in line and also to make it shorter for some of the reasons I just said before. And the same question there, what is the format? Okay, let's have a look. Something they are coming up, popping up. Sorry, I don't want to miss anybody's. There's no error correction anymore, right? No error correction. That's gone. That went before, didn't it? Will there be similar changes to other main suite examinations in the near future? Yes, there will. The advanced exam, CAE, the advanced exam, it's going to be called. It's called First and Advanced now, and that 2 is coming out. They'll be coming out in 2015. January 2015 is the first sitting of that exam, and there'll be a Ready for Advanced out in January, the end of January. So look out for that, for the new exam. No error correction. Set text will only be applicable to First for schools and not First for adults. That's right. That's right. The set text option is only for First for schools. We've got in Ready for First. We've got those preparation material for that in the teacher's book if you're interested, for both stories and set texts. Why is the exam made easier? Well, that's debatable. I'm not going to. Can't answer that one. I think the level is the same. It's made shorter, but easier, no. but then you can debate that with Cambridge. Will there be more CB testing for writing? Sorry, if to explain CB. Course book testing for writing? I'm not sure, sorry. Has the third edition come out yet? Yes, it has. It's already there in the shops and selling, and people are already using it. It's got a lot of new material. 80% of the readings are new, and 50–60% of the listings are new. Available textbooks, well, just ready for first at the moment from the main publishers.
Hi, Roy. Thanks for answering those questions for us. Guys, if there's anything else urgent, then I think our time's nearly...
Somebody says, when does the new exam format come in? They missed the beginning. January 2015, the very beginning of 2015. And it says, so now FC is called First, right? Yes, it is called First. Cambridge English First.
Great.
Okay. Am I in favour of such changes? Some of them, yeah, some of them, no. I mean, sorry, I'd love to chat to you at length about that, but I can't. You've got my email there. If you want to ask me that on the email, please go ahead. Okay, that's it, Henry.
Great. Thank you very much, Roy. Thanks for a great talk, and thanks to everyone for their participation today. We're going to be having a short break now before our next talk with Sam McCarter, who's just joined us here in the office. So you can go away now, fetch yourselves a drink, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes when we'll be starting the next talk. Roy, would you just like to say a quick word of thanks to everybody who's been watching today?
Well, yeah, overwhelmed by the number of people who took part, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I just wish I could see you, but thanks ever so much for coming on, and it's great to know that I could reach people in as far away as Japan, Brazil, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Bournemouth. Thanks very much.
Sunny Bournemouth. Excellent. Okay, then we'll say goodbye to Roy now, who's going to go off and enjoy the Spanish sun for a bit more. And if you've got any further questions for him, then you can send those on to us here or tweet at us too. Don't forget. So bye to Roy. I'm going to just quickly turn my video off now, as I need to put up the new slides for our next talk. But you can stay in this room and keep talking to each other in the chat box.
Start. Okay, I shall start. Good afternoon to everyone from London. I hope you can hear me well. We did a test earlier and it came out well, so I hope you can see me clearly as well. In the next 45 minutes, what I am going to do is to talk about 10 tips for teachers preparing students for the academic version of IELTS. And this is the very basic abstract. And my focus here is on helping students to increase their awareness of organization and flexibility so that they can use the grammar and vocabulary that they know efficiently across all 4 components of the IELTS exam. Some of the tips I will dwell upon longer than others because they are more important, and perhaps because they go across all of the exam skills. The first tip that I would like to talk about is in the reading component, which is text navigation. Text navigation being the ability of students to find a way and move around text at speed. A lot of students complain about the fact that they are not able to answer the questions in the reading component very well and within the time. So what I'm going to talk about is how to focus on the organization, what organization to focus on, and what skills to focus on. Now this slide is composed of, well, there's 2 parts to this slide really. The first thing here is the types of passage, getting students to recognize the differences between texts that are explaining, texts that are arguing and presenting opinion, and historical and biographical texts. These are the main texts that students will get in the exam. Along with that, within all academic texts, there are a series of features which are finite, meaning that they are limited, and they are repeated, they go across all different types of disciplines, whether it's science, technology, engineering, medicine. And these are features I've given you here: time relationships, problem solution, cause effect, etc. And it's getting students to recognize these features in text bit by bit so that they can then recognize them with different types of reading passages. The reading passages themselves are infinite in variety, but the types of features within these texts are fairly limited. And if it helps us ourselves when we are looking at the text thinking, oh, students have a difficulty recognizing cause and effect, difficulty recognizing comparison, contrast, argument, etc. So if we look at this together with the next slide, we can see other areas, and some of these are also more maybe relevant in writing and speaking than they are in reading. However, they go across the whole gamut of the skills. And if we think about it, getting students to recognize exemplification, giving examples, and the difference between general and specific in reading texts is going to help them when it comes to their own writing in task 2 and in speaking. If I jump back again to the previous slide, we can see here comparison and contrast, which is not just in reading, it is also in writing, in task 1, but also in task 2, where students would be able to give their opinion, making statements using comparison. For example, I might write, and I might say that swimming is better for you than walking. Well, that's my opinion, because somebody else might say that walking is better than swimming. It depends on what your belief is. There may be medical reasons, but there are also personal reasons. So maybe selecting during lessons aspects of these features will help students to build up a picture of what IELTS is and what academic writing and reading and listening is, so that they are not doing things in a vacuum. This helps students to get a picture of the structure of IELTS rather than just the looking at different types of information inside the text. Now, the next slide are the skills, and you are probably familiar with a lot of these, but this covers several slides. The first thing there is surveying. I put that in brackets because this information is taken from a particular textbook which is well known. And surveying is not in it. The surveying is looking at the whole exam for the reading very, very quickly, and just to get an idea to work out what is going on. Students need to learn to use different skills and select the skills at any one time. Sometimes it is skimming, sometimes scanning. Skimming, you can help students to skim by getting them to look at the nouns and the verbs only. For example, if I say to you at, by, for, with, to, in, at, on, that's not going to give you a picture of what is in the text. But if I say to you aircraft, cancellation, flight, luggage, lost, I'm giving you a picture even just with a few nouns and verbs, etc. So students need to move in and out of looking at the text generally, skimming, scanning for very specific information. How they do that is up to them, but scanning you don't need to read. Your students are locating. They can look at a text from a paragraph from the bottom upwards, locating information. When you have got them proficient at doing this, then you can get them to look for synonyms and paraphrase, not just words. Then we come to close reading, and this close reading sorry, is where the small words like in, at, on, by, with, from, the, etc. come into their own. Students need to be able to look at a text very, very carefully and analyze the interaction. So surveying, prediction, skimming, and scanning allows students to find a way around things quite quickly, and close reading is where students are going to come and look at a text very carefully. They need to be able to do all of this to operate very, very fast. So there are other important skills. I'm not going to go into each of these, but obviously distinguishing between factual and non-factual information, important and less important items. This is very important for students when they are looking in a paragraph, trying to extract particular information for a question. It's getting them to see things at different level. Is something important, or is it subsidiary? And sometimes it's reading it may be worth just looking at a text from this point of view before you answer the questions. Now I'm going to jump on. Obviously here we've got a few more skills. These are again related to in-depth reading. I'm just going to look at the second one here, understanding text organization and linguistic semantic aspects. Here, looking at the relationship between and within sentences, looking at cohesion, and then recognizing discourse. If we can get students to recognize this in the reading, we then can help them to recognize this in their writing, when they're writing and when they're checking their own writing and when they're speaking. I don't think we can assume that students, because they can do it in writing, that they can do it in reading, or vice versa. So I think when we are doing this in reading, we need to say, oh, this is just what you're doing in task 1 or task 2 or even in part 3 of the speaking. Now, to move on to the next tip, I think this is quite important. It is related to the previous tip, in that if we are creating an awareness of how things are organized from a language point of view in the academic world, whether it is reading, writing, or speaking, or anything, or listening, getting students to be aware that things happen together. If I look at the second one here, problem and solution, if I think of a problem, the problem is quite often followed by a solution. And generally, if you were looking, say, for a heading in a text, a reading passage, you would, and the heading was related to solution, you wouldn't look at the beginning of the text. You'd probably look at middle end, possibly the end. So this helps students to be aware of how things are organized. And this then takes us on to cause-effect solution. Cause and effect chains are a feature which occur in again and again in all aspects of text. So effect may come at the beginning, followed by cause, but solution is generally going to come at the end. So, if I am working with my students, I get them to think about this from the point of view of the reading and the point of view of their writing and their speaking and listening. And I get them to look at the language related to a cause, causes, effects, and solutions. What verbs, what collocations do I have for effect, have a huge impact on, have an effect on, influence, lead to, produce, etc. And this is very, very useful when you're getting students to analyze questions, because a multiple choice question might be organized around a cause and then 4 effects, or an effect followed by 4 causes. It might be an action followed by 4 purposes, which students have to choose. So effectively, if we're simplifying all of this, everything in the world which is present has a past, and that past might be a cause, and the present can be a problem or an effect, and the future can be a solution. We go back to the very first item on the tip 1, time relationships. And time relationships are very important because they feed into how information like cause, effect, and solution are organized. This is how we classify ideas, the development of ideas. So if we are aware of this, we can use this as a template for teaching and gradually make our students aware of this, so we can navigate everything in our lesson and everything in the exam. Now I'm going to turn to writing task 1 now. Students are quite often frightened of this, and they tend to do task 1 very, very quickly, or they focus on task 2 because task 2 carries double the marks. My advice is to get students to definitely do task 1 first before they do task 2 in the exam. That they also, when they're looking at the task, that they learn before the exam to understand what the data is about, get them to think what the purpose of the data is, because every data collection and every data set has a purpose. And they can find out what is being assessed by looking at the public marking scores. This is not a mystery. These are found on www.ielts.com. IELTS.org, or you'll find them there's a DVD called IELTS Scores Explained, which is published by the British Council, Cambridge, and you can order it from them. There, all of the scores for all of the aspects of the exam are contained. So you can get students to look at the scores, look at the score bands, and look at what is being tested. And say to them, okay, now this is what the examiners are going to mark. We need to look at this. So it's a total awareness of the sets of data, maps, and processes. I would advise you to think about maps and processes. They may not come as frequently as graphs and charts, but they do come. A recent exam that I think a student of mine had in this last couple of weeks was the changes to a library, what changes happened to a library as it was renovated. You know, students need to be able to do this. So if we teach them what is the structure of the task, what is expected in the content, then we can help them enormously. So what is expected in the content of the of students' answers? These are some of the features, and you could give this to students after they have written a piece of a task one answer, or you can give it to them beforehand to to focus on the things that they need to include. You could also give it to them during the writing so that they can check that they're doing things as they go along. And all of these things are important. Comparison, contrast comes into the rubric. It says in the rubric, summarize, and what do students generally not do? They don't summarize, they list information. And this is crucial. Without a good overview stating what the main trends are, or the main trend, students will not get a good score. And there are features of writing which are very important for task one, for the whole exam. And one of them I'm going to select here is noun phrases and nominalization. For task one and across the exam, students might need to be aware of what nominalization is. It's a major grammatical feature. I noticed that someone has asked a question about the website. It's www.ielts.org. An awareness of nominalization. Nominalization is a process where information is transformed and changed and built around the noun. In EFL, generally, information might be built around the verb. For example, in task one, we might have car sales rose gradually in the UK between 2005 and 2010. Now you see here that you've got a simple noun phrase, car sales, and then a verb, rose, an adverb, gradually, and then you've got in the UK, etc. But when we're summarizing, we will build information around nouns. There was a gradual rise in car sales. Here we have rise as the noun, gradual becomes the adjective, the article A, and then we have a post-nominal phrase in car sales, again another post-nominal phrase in the UK, and then the time phrase. That's quite a long noun phrase. And if you think about it, when you look at writing task 2, you get questions where the noun phrase is quite long. The role of technology in the workplace is blah, blah, blah. And students have to be able to talk about that. Students might then end up focusing on the word workplace or the word technology and not realizing that we've got this important word here, role. It's not technology, it's the role of technology. The second one here, some people think that, sorry, I've left a word out here. Some people think that the impact of modern media on young people's lives is greater than. And you've got the impact of modern media on young people's lives as quite a long phrase for students to process. They might get this in the speaking. So I think it's very important to focus on getting students to create noun phrases and to see them in paragraph headings and in writing task 2 and also in speaking and listening. Here are simple examples of even article, section and paragraph headings, the impact of wilderness tourism. You see that is what, 5 words? But here we see in the next one the role of the media in young people's lives. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words, which is the average, used to be the average length of a noun phrase in academic text. It is now roughly 11. And if you then transform this into a speaking question for IELTS Part 3, do you think that the impact of modern media on young people's lives is greater than? Can students process that? When you're writing, students may have difficulty. If I go back to the previous slide and I look at the writing, you see here you've got nouns and prepositions. And the same for the next one. Nouns and prepositions are perhaps more common in academic text than verbs. And you have here a very long noun phrase. You might have in the listening and the note-taking, there's something of pollution on the marine habitat in New Zealand, where there is a verb which says that pollution had a serious effect on, or seriously affected, and students are having to select the word, so had an impact on blah blah blah. So we are having to transform and add to the insert the actual word impact or effect into the text here. Tip 5. Now, writing task 2, the focus here is on skills transfer and awareness. I talked about what is the features in reading, and the features occur here in the writing. If we look at some examples of current rubrics, understanding question types, discuss both these views and give your own opinion. This is very, very similar to what I mentioned about the reading in the first slide, where we were talking about argumentation. And when we're giving our own opinion and other people's opinion, we might use cause and effect chains, giving our opinion with contrasts and comparisons, and also giving examples. So all of those early bits of information we need to transfer from the reading into the writing. We need to get students to understand what is expected for the specific rubrics in task 2, and work out exactly what is being asked. For this first one here, both these views, discuss both these views and give your own opinion. There are 3 things going on here. Students must talk about both views and then discuss their opinion related to this. So if they don't follow these prompts exactly, they won't get the scores that they require, because they will lose out on task completion. And again, I would say look at the public marking scores related to this. Here, the second one, to what extent you agree or disagree with this opinion. Students are again given quite a lot of leeway. They can agree, disagree, partially agree, etc. But again, what are we doing? When we're writing, we are comparing, contrasting, giving examples, reasons, developing ideas using cause and effect chains. And it's a very simple way of getting students to develop their ideas is to just give them maybe just a word, like technology, get them to build ideas around the word technology, technology workplace, technology communication training. And then think, well, what is the relationship between technology and communication? Well, technology has a huge impact on communication. How did this happen? It happens because it means that people can use the internet to give conferences to people all around the world. So it's very easy to build up ideas just by taking simple single words, get students to put other words next to them that are related, and then ask them to think of the relationships using, again, the features that I mentioned at the beginning. They can classify information regarding technology, they can classify problems, they can compare and contrast, etc. So it's quite easy to start navigating the actual task 2 questions, as well as navigating the reading. Total flexibility, which comes through awareness and transferring information across the skills within the exam rather than isolating them to one particular area. One crucial thing about the task 2 is the rubric at the end, which is repeated in all exams, which students tend to ignore, which is give reasons for your answer and include any relevant examples from your own, again, a word has been chopped out here, own experience. This is crucial. Students in task 1, they generally list all of the information because the information, the supporting information is given in the graph, so they list it and don't summarize. Task 2, students tend to give general information and don't support the information, giving reasons and examples. And you can perhaps see the structure of the exam. Task 2 is a stepping stone to task 1, because here students are given ideas which they then write about. Task 2, they have to use their own ideas based on experience and then add this in. So it's counterintuitive in a way for students to write task 2 first in the exam, followed by task 1. There is a stepping stone structure. Sorry, that has got, something's happened there. So I'm going to jump to tip 7. I don't know what's happened to that. I'm going to now talk about awareness of paragraphs in the writing, and again I would connect this with the reading. How many paragraphs do students need for task 2? Well, a maximum perhaps of 5. That is the classic example. The simplest way for students to remember it is like their hand, where you have the introduction, body paragraphs, and conclusion. If I write about 30-ish words, this is not fixed, 30-ish words for my introduction, and about 20-30 words for the conclusion, that leaves me with around 200 words. 200 divided by 3 is not very much. It's about 70 words, 65, 70. So getting students to write paragraphs that are 65 words, 70 words long is much easier than giving them a blank sheet and saying to them, oh, write 250 words. Get them to divide up the essay. And in 65 words, they've told the students what they want. They want reasons and examples. So if we look at the bottom of the page here, I've given some triggers the students can use to create their own template rather than just writing in a vacuum. I want a reason, I want because, I want for example, and I want examples using such as, and maybe clauses using for example, and I want contrasts, and I want results. And they're synonyms. If I put all of those into my writing, I'd have about 110 words. So really, I only need to give a reason. I need my topic sentence to start off with, stating what the paragraph is about. I then give examples and reasons, maybe give a contrast, give a result, and perhaps write a conclusion. Basic paragraph, obviously it varies from situation to situation, but getting basic paragraph structure, I can then use cause and effect chains. If I'm thinking of doing something on health, that exercise improves health, then what does health improve? Health improves people's well-being. When they improve their well-being, their productivity is improved. The productivity is improved. They become richer. So seeing how things relate to each other, you can then build up a paragraph, and you might get students to expand the paragraph using if. So if people do more exercise, it will improve their health, and if they are then healthy, it will make them much more productive. You then get them to remove the if in the repetition. People can improve their health by doing exercise such as, and then such as walking, swimming, etc. This will make them much more productive, for example. So you can start getting them to build, you can play around. It's like doing a jigsaw. This can be done with bits of paper or whatever. I'm conscious of time here. I'm going to go on to looking at ideas. I am always wary of using the word create. We say to students, oh, create ideas for this. But they're not Einstein. And sometimes it can be frightening to someone says, oh, come create ideas. It's not something you, in the academic world, generally, you gather ideas. You bring them together from different sources, you collect them, and sometimes, yes, we might create something. But it's maybe less frightening to say and gather. If we use the traditional brainstorming method, which is fine, where you can get students to take the word technology and build ideas around it. You can obviously, you can do it with a word, or you can do it with a question or part of a question. A very simple thing is to give students a word, like I use technology, and ask them to write words that are related to it. It might be physical things like computer, it might be headache, it might be speed, it might be convenience, it might be iPad. They just write the words, individual words. Maybe don't get them to write ideas, because ideas, going back to nominalization, require phrases, and the impact of technology might take a longer time to instruct an individual thought related to a word. So students can build up their information with word association, and then get them to say what the link is between the words, the main word, technology, and other words. Get them to discuss it. They can do it in pairs, they can do it in groups, and by the end you've got a very large bank of material. And you can recycle these. I'll come to recycling in a moment. Another thing is the students sometimes say that they cannot create ideas. I've had this many times. I've had teachers say this to me. Well, I give students a list of adjectives and prospective adjectives. We look at problems from the social, environmental, legal, financial, economic, educational point of view. You'll notice that most of these words are AL adjectives. There are thousands in English, but we only need about a dozen for IELTS, and I would collect these. I was teaching this morning. I teach by video, and I was doing an essay question with my students at a hospital in the north of England, and one of them started saying, oh, we can analyze this question from the individual, social, and financial point of view. And I thought, wow, this is good. He's beginning to talk my language. He's now speaking fluent IELTS. He knows how to organize information. And then the others were just inserting ideas into the social aspect. You can give students a list and say to them, well, can you examine this problem from these different perspectives? You can throw at them poverty. You can throw at them environmental problems. You can throw at them crime. Crime covers all of these. So it's a good way of getting students to classify their ideas. I believe it's not the fact that students have a lack of ideas, it's the fact that they don't know how to organize them and then link them. These perspectives are a way of helping us to classify. And then when students have these, you can get them to recycle ideas for different essays. For example, an essay on poverty, well, we can look at it from an educational point of view. We can look at recycling from an educational point of view. We can look at crime from an educational point of view. It's a very neat and simple way of helping students. Another way of helping students to think about ideas is to use a question. Get students to write their own questions, give them the word technology, poverty, anything, and say to them, okay, can you create a question relating to IELTS? For example, you might have they might want to use a rubric, discuss both views and give your both these views and give your own opinion. So some people think that the best way to eradicate poverty is through education, while others think the best way is blah, blah, blah. Discuss both these views. By creating the question, it will help students to focus on the organization of the ideas. They will then start bringing in their own ideas. 2 more slides left, and the speaking, I think we can approach this again from the writing, getting students to think of the organization in the speaking, and you can use speaking as a way to introduce writing and writing as a way to introduce speaking. You can get students to talk about technology or whatever, and then write about it. For speaking, for part 2, organization, students are given a minute to write notes, and the notes that they write, in effect, it's basically script independence. They use the notes to talk for up to 2 minutes. And you may not realize, or you may have timed your students and worked out how many words they say, but roughly, depending on breathing and the individual student, about 230 to roughly 250 words in 2 minutes. Just to remind you of task 2, the word limit there, everything interconnected. And when students are writing these words, I would say that they write them, I mean, they can write in different ways, but I try to get students to try different ways, and quite often the one that they like is writing maybe 10 or 12 words vertically, more horizontally, but vertically it means that they can see it. If you think about it, you're looking at a slide now, and the information is organized vertically. The task, the part 2, is like script independence that we train students in the academic world when they're doing PowerPoints. They then use the words as prompts in order to build their ideas. And if you think it from the opposite point of view, from the reading, in reading we are getting students to skim, to look at individual bits of information, looking at words, so they can use maybe 7 or 8 to 10 words in a paragraph to build the core of the information. If students can see this in their part 2, they will hopefully be able to see how skimming works and scanning works in the reading. We must learn to transfer the skills across all parts of the exam. You then end up with very efficient students whose language is improving, their skills improving dramatically. I started a conference recently with a quote from my own experience. I've been in teaching for about over 30 years now, and towards the beginning of my career, I've taught medics all my life, like doctors, dentists, nurses, and at the end of a course, a doctor came up to me and paid me a compliment, which at the beginning I didn't think was a compliment, but I realized what she was saying when she finished saying it. She said, you have taught us nothing, but I can do everything. And it's the last bit which is important. I was focusing on how to do things, teaching them how to move around text. Students quite often have the vocabulary and the grammar, but they don't know how to combine, recombine, move around. IELTS is a test of students' ability to use language. It's a test of their competence, not a test of their knowledge per se of grammar and vocabulary. So this is crucial for us to lift the vocabulary and grammar up into the skills and get them to move these around. For part 3, it's very similar in many ways to task 2, developing a paragraph. Students need to be able to answer the same sorts of questions that they would get in task 2. The exam and the speaking component is a movement away from the abstract, so from the personal to the abstract, and when students get to part 3, what they need to be able to do is to analyze an abstract idea. And the last slide is listening. I'm up to my time limit here. Get students to predict what is in the listening and get them to be aware of the structure of the different types of questions. And when it comes to lower level students, to note-taking in task, section 4, get them to think of understanding the notes from a point of view of the grammar, the point of view of nominalization. And it's quite a nice exercise to get students to work out the meaning of these phrases, because there's no verb in this note-taking exercise. And then impact of or effect of pollution on the marine environment in New Zealand, which I used earlier. Sometimes it's different. What's this about? This is a summary of the information. It is a summary which might appear in a paragraph heading or a section heading, or it might even be an article heading. It might even be part of a noun phrase for task 2. And it might be, as I said, a paragraph heading in a reading passage. So getting students to see the connections across the exam in the different skills, predict relationships and predict skills. It's not just the prediction skills occur. If I say to my students cause, I want them to think of effect. If I say to students problem, I want them to think of solution. And students might look at this blank here without listening and think that pollution is negative, oh, I've seen this structure in my writing and in my reading passages before. I think the word might be impact or effects. So organization, flexibility, in order for students to help to classify the vocabulary and ideas and grammar that they know. Okay, I think that's basically it. I've done my 10 slides, my 10 tips. Okay, I'll hand over to Henry now.
Thank you, Sam. It's an excellent talk. I hope everyone has taken plenty away from that. I've seen lots of questions with people asking if they're going to be able to watch that again. Yes, they will. It's going to be on our website, on the conference website, hopefully by tomorrow, and Sam's slides will be available to download there too. Sam, would you just like to say a quick thank you and goodbye to everybody who's come along today?
Okay, thank you for listening. I hope you found some of the tips interesting, and I hope they give you a kind of template for awareness for analyzing your teaching and helping students achieve higher scores on IELTS. Okay, it's been a pleasure talking. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Okay, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me still. So that was Sam's talk on IELTS. Next up we have Jaimie Scanlon, who will be delivering a presentation on academic English, starting in roughly 10 minutes. So again, it's time for you to take a break if you want, but if you want to stay in front of your computer, then you can carry on talking to each other in the chat box. Okay, I'm going to just need to put up Jaimie's slides, and then we'll be back. Oh, well remembered, Jaimie. Yep, we're recording. So if you've just come in, you need to set up your audio. So go into Tools, Audio, Audio Setup Wizard, and then you'll be able to hear us perfectly, hopefully. Once you've done that, you'll see the participant interface, which has got the video stream up in the left, where we're speaking to you right now from, the participant list, and the chat box underneath. And that's where you can type to us, write us messages, ask questions, say hello, and just talk to each other generally. And on the right there is where the PowerPoint presentation is going to appear shortly, once I've finished talking you through this. If you're having problems still hearing us, then it's probably due to the fact that your audio feed isn't turned up properly. So you might find that you need to adjust that, and you do that by finding the video there up in the top left and looking down at the two sliders underneath. It's the one on the right-hand side you want, and if you turn that up max, then you should be able to hear us fine then. If you're still having problems, I'd suggest visiting this site here, which is the Blackboard Collaborate support section. It's got lots of handy tips if you're still struggling. During the talk, there's a couple of ways that you can interact with Jaimie and myself as the moderators. So if you're having problems with your computer, then I'd recommend raising your hand using this icon here. So push that, and we'll see that you're having problems, and I'll try and help on the chat. And then there's the polling icon too, which I think Jaimie's going to be making use of today. That's the icon on the right with the tick and the cross. So when she asks you a question as a group, you can use that to respond. And it does occasionally change to multiple choice as well, depending on the type of question that's being put to you. So I hope that's all made sense. If anything's still unclear, you can write to me in the chat box, and I'll answer you as soon as possible. But for now, that's it from me. I'm going to turn myself off. I'll still be in the chat box, but I'm going to turn my video off, and I'm going to leave Jaimie now to start her talk. Jaimie, I'm handing over to you. Best of luck. Guys, I hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Thanks. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining this Macmillan Online Conference and this last session of today. And thanks to the folks at Macmillan for organizing this, and thank you to Henry for your assistance with moderating. I am going to, let's see. There we are. So today we're talking about critical engagement in academic English. Just to begin with, I have a little, so not just for Henry, of course, but for everyone, I wanted to share a little bit about where I'm coming to you from. So I'm coming to you from my living room in the state of Vermont in the United States, which is pronounced Vermont in French. It's the Green Mountain State. It is located in the very top, in the very northeastern section of the United States, which is the region known as New England, so as opposed to the Old England where Henry is, which is this direction over here. I apologize for this ethnocentric U.S. map. Canada is located up here, so I'm very close to Canada, but not quite all the way up there. And I live here with my beautiful family, which I will show you in a moment. Oh, my family's not there. I don't know where they went. Well, they're very lovely. So one of the things that Vermont is famous for is covered bridges. So these are historical kind of romantic structures that are tourist attractions. People come and take pictures of them, and they're all over the state of Vermont. And I really like the symbolism of bridges. I always have. And so we're going to talk about bridges in this session. And in fact, my husband and I were married on a bridge. If you can see the photo, probably not very well behind me, but we were married on a bridge at my parents' home over a river. And to me, it's a connection. It's a way to get from point A to point B safely. And so these structures in Vermont, covered bridges, were covered for several reasons. One was for strength, to provide strength. So a support, the crossbars, the cross sort of bars on these bridges offer support so that the wooden bridge doesn't begin to sag. And as such, they give it strength and durability to withstand the elements in Vermont. There's a lot of extreme weather here. It gets very cold and it gets very icy and snowy in the winter. So it provides a durability to withstand the elements in difficult, extreme climates. And security and safety. So it's covered when it's icy, cars don't slip off the side of the bridge. So I look at those things as things that teachers of academic English are doing for their students, providing that strength to withstand a challenging situation, the demands of the academic environment, providing the support they need to hold themselves up and stand on their own in that environment, and the security and confidence to join in the academic community as a participant in that interaction. So let me just take a moment, and now I've shared a little bit about where I'm from and what's famous from Vermont. And if you would, in the chat box, just put a brief note about where you're from and one thing that is famous from your region, just in the spirit of this kind of humanizing our virtual community here. Do I see anybody adding into the chat box? I hear I'm very loud from Mylan or Malin St. John. I'm going to be quiet, quieter. From Toronto, we have people, others in Canada, very close. We have some in Romania, wonderful. Argentina, that's great. Prague, Tokyo, some in Japan. Maple syrup could be Canada. We have maple syrup in Vermont too. It's famous, one of our famous things, but I'm not as famous as in Canada. India, Poland, sea and fine sand. Cynthia says Italy. Rimini on the Adriatic Sea, fine sand at the sea. North Carolina, golf and NASCAR racing. Wonderful. So I wanted to get a sense of our community and who we all are. I wish I could know more about all of you. So now we move to talking about critical engagement in academic English. So in the description of my presentation, I mentioned I'm going to talk about 5 elements or 5 skills of critical engagement. And we're going to do that one by one and talk about sort of why they're important and what they and how we can incorporate them into our classes. So first focusing on the word critical. And when we think about critical in terms of critical thinking in the academic realm, to me 2 things come to mind. So there's that meaning of critical as being essential or important. So it's something that students really can't do without in an academic environment, is that skill to look at something critically. And then there is the critical, meaning being questioning or discerning about something that they've come in contact with, about information or facts, or not just accepting things at face value, but questioning them and determining their real value. And then engagement. So I'd like to hear a little bit about so when you think of engagement, what comes to mind? If you could type in the chat box some words that come to mind when you think of engagement, or when you hear the word engagement. And it could just be generally, or it could be in relation to students in the classroom. Participation, involvement, right, Luciana? Participation, and Madonna says involvement, getting involved. Angela, being active, group work, wonderful. Motivation, involvement, lots of involvement, cooperation, discussion, great. So all of these things are things that I think of too. So for me, engagement is really being kind of hooked into something in a very whole self kind of way. So when a piece of machinery is fully engaged, it's working to its full potential, and it's locked and loaded, so to speak. It's deeply kind of deeply involved, as you say. And woven together in a way that I guess connects to other things. So like these gears, it has the potential to spread out and spread energy. So to me, that's what engagement really is and does. And we know what engagement looks like. Personal engagement, when we're engaged with someone or something, there's a focus, and there's a communion where we're joining something with we're putting our whole self into that communication and that communion. And we know what it looks like in our classroom when students are really the gears are turning, so to speak, and they're very engaged in the content and with each other and with us as teachers. They're fully participating very actively, as many of you have said. And so, and they're compelled. To me, that there's that piece, being compelled to participate. So really not being able to hold back, really wanting to share ideas and with other students, with peers, and with us. And so that's what critical engagement is about in the terms I'm speaking about it today, is that giving students that license to be fully active in the participation and to become engaged as full-fledged participants in the academic conversation, as John Goshert calls it in his book, Entering the Academic Conversation, which I'll mention a little bit later. So building those skills and that desire to be fully engaged and to give your whole self and to question and to wonder and to expand on ideas. And the confidence. So once again, back to that strength, support, and security of the bridge. How can we do that for students? So one of the tools that I use in thinking about my courses or curriculum so critical engagement, I want to say, is also, so when we think about critical thinking, I'm curious to know, I know that this is somewhat culturally bound, and that that in different sort of educational paradigms around the world, it isn't necessarily the norm, or isn't easy for students to question authority or question the experts. It doesn't come naturally to read a text or listen to a lecture and think, well, I'm not sure if I agree with that, or I'm not sure this person, this expert supported, this authority on this subject supported his claims very well. I know from teaching in Japan, it was very challenging to get students to come to that point, because it wasn't in their habit. So I'm curious, in the places where you're teaching, in your teaching contexts, is critical thinking something that is explicitly required or suggested to include in your curriculum at the tertiary level? And if you could just indicate that with a yes or no. So is it something that your institutions where you work or the ministries of education where you teach focus on as a goal, as an educational goal in where you teach? So if you could use the poll and indicate yes or no. So we have a number of yeses and some no's, but lots of yeses. So it seems to be in the countries where you're from, in the institutions where you're from, it is important. So yes, it is, and critical engagement then is a vehicle. We can think of it as the vehicle for critical thinking. How do we get students there to that point? So one of the tools I use is this Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm curious to know about your experience or familiarity with Bloom's taxonomy. So I have a little poll, which is a multiple choice poll this time. If you could indicate your familiarity with Bloom's taxonomy by choosing the statement which best reflects your familiarity with Bloom's taxonomy. And I believe, yes, so you can choose A, B, C, or D in your poll. So it looks like we have a wide spread. Some of you have heard of it. So it looks like the the B's have it. It rings a bell. Some folks have heard of it, have a vague memory of it, but not necessarily using it. And then many of you have never heard of it. And a few of you really feel the way I do about it, which is that it's a very useful tool for thinking in particular about critical engagement and critical thinking. So here's a brief introduction to some of you who don't know it, but I would encourage you to find out more about it. It's a very useful way to think about how we can engage students in those sort of more complex interactions with content that allow them to think, to engage critically and then think critically. So in Bloom's taxonomy, there is, so a brief history about it. It was developed in the 1950s by Benjamin Bloom, an educational researcher, and a panel of educators who wanted to establish kind of a description of the learning process and of what students need to do in order to really learn effectively. So it really puts learning in relief as opposed to teaching and what the teacher does. It's focused really on what students are doing in order to learn, and puts the teacher as facilitator of those interactions. So there's three learning domains according to this taxonomy. It says that all learning happens in three domains mainly, which are cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, which really basically mean the head. Cognitive is the head, that's the thinking. Affective is the heart, feeling. And psychomotor is the hands, or doing. So the head, heart, hands is kind of an easy way to remember it. And it's often shown, Bloom's taxonomy is often shown in the form of a pyramid. And this I liked. It's an adaptation of the most common way that it is represented. But it has these, so remembering, understanding, and applying. And then it has these three higher order thinking skills, creating, evaluating, and analyzing up at the top. And so, as I said, I won't focus too much on this, but for those of you who are unfamiliar, there are some resources here, websites, and you can find lots of information to explore this more online. But we'll focus today on these three top-tier interactions: creating, evaluating, and analyzing. And I have my interpretation of them, and I have my sort of way that I'm thinking of them in these 5 critical engagement skills that I'm going to talk about. So if we look at summarizing being the first one, so the sort of basic core of critical engagement, and then go around to analyzing, evaluating, and creating, and then assuming a position of authority. So those are the 5 critical engagement elements or skills I'm going to be talking about today. And this I call kind of like a virtuous circle of learning at the academic, sort of in academic environment. So I'm going to focus on the first one, which is summarizing. And that is what John Goschert, the author of this wonderful resource called Entering the Academic Conversation, calls the core of critical engagement. And so the summary and summarizing the skills, the ability to clearly and accurately summarize content that students have read or heard, really provides that foundation for students to be able to then think critically about it. So, so that piece is really the kind of the the real foundation that students are going to build their critical thinking skills upon. So the why, what summarizing does, and I have a little interactive activity here, so fill in the blank activity. So when students summarize, they become what on the content? If you could type it into the chat box. What is that missing word there? Summarizing allows students to become engaged. Derek says experts. Tommy, engaged. Engaged is true. Many of you are engaged. Many of you have said engaged. Let me see who that was again that said experts. Naomi said experts. Derek said experts. So yes. So when students summarize something they've read or heard, it gives them an opportunity to become experts on the content. So they have to read it very carefully. They have to read it very, or hear or listen to it very carefully and extract the main points. And in order to explain something to others, you have to know it well. So a summary really gives students the opportunity and the responsibility to learn what they've read well, and then explain it in a very clear and concise way. So they say that, you know, the best way to learn something is to teach it to others. So the summary really provides that opportunity for students to do that, to become an expert on the content, the what. And then through that, they, as I've said, they develop skills for explaining information accurately. So that's really the becoming a credible. They become a credible source themselves. They become an expert themselves in being able to explain that to others. To be able to do that sort of also allows them to anticipate their own critical responses. So that deep level of reading something carefully allows them to naturally think more deeply about the content and naturally be able to say, well, what do I think about that? And so they're already on their way to developing that critical thinking as they're doing summarizing. So, and the last piece, and probably I think the most important for a lot of the cultures where it's not the norm for students to question. It begins to help students gain what? To enter the academic conversation. There's another quiz for you. Gain the necessary C. Let's see what we get. Type it into the chat box if you have an idea. Let's see, confidence, competence, credentials, competence, confidence, yes. So gain confidence and credentials if that fits. That's another valid word. So this piece, entering the academic conversation. So if you're more likely to enter a conversation if you have something to say about it, if you know something about that topic and that content. So that's what it opens the door. Summarizing summary skills open the door for students to join in the conversation as an active participant and as an expert. So now if we focus on now we talked about the what, the summarizing, and so if we go back to the bridge and those 3 S's, the strength, support, and security, and the how do we help students summarize? So focusing on reading skills, reading for so skimming and scanning, effective strategies for effective and efficient reading, so being able to read something quickly but also understand it deeply, extracting main ideas and supporting information, identifying, so looking at summaries of a text and deciding Is it effective or not? Does it include the main points or not? So they're looking critically at summaries and thinking, does this accurately reflect what I've read in the original version? Note-taking skills and text marking, so being able to highlight and be active readers and use those skills to help them extract the necessary information in order to write or to tell orally an effective summary. Reported speech in terms of grammar and language, so how do you effectively express what someone else has said, as well as academic vocabulary. So being able to, students want to sort of sound like they're experts too. So being able to say, this text, the author illustrates, for example, that blah, 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 or the author refutes the point, da, 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 da. So the academic vocabulary that gives them the credentials and sort of the feeling that they can speak with confidence as a participant in that academic realm. And then make it a habit. So these skills, often courses or textbooks will present these skills as sort of in one section or one unit, and learn summarizing skills, and we may as teachers focus on them for a while, but not necessarily always have students doing them. So each of these 5 skills are really going to be served, students will be served well by being able to do these things all the time and consistently with everything that they read and listen to in the classroom, in the course. So the next piece is analyzing. So I want to go back there. So for me, having students do analysis, focuses on critical literacy. So that piece of being able to read something and question it, or question the sources and question the validity and question the support, the amount of support for a certain claim. And then that ties in also with information literacy. So today students have such a huge world full of information and so many ways to get it that it can be very overwhelming. So really those skills of information literacy, knowing where to go for reliable information and how to get it, what to do with it, and how to determine whether it's useful for for their field of study or for their project, and then being able to look at it and question whether it is useful, or whether the author did include all of the perspectives and support that's necessary to make it a valid piece of information. So when we talk about the why, in analysis, in the analyzing stage, students examine how information is organized in the text. So they categorize information, they analyze rhetorical structures, and how do writers and researchers present information, what formats does it take. And then they learn how to determine another quiz. What's that word? How to determine the R word of sources. Let's see if you can type it into the chat box. Yes, Cynthia and Alfredo, reliability. Cheryl, reference. Anka, reliability. Relevance. Eden, Melody says reliability. Relationship. All of those are good. What I was going for is that reliability. So really how do they know that a source is a reliable source of information? So as I said, those skills of looking for a balanced presentation of information. Does this include all the perspectives? Is it missing something? Did the author leave something out? Is there bias here? And so they focus on, as such, focusing on research ethics and scholarly. This is a hard one. I'll see if you guys get this. Scholarly I word. See if you can type that one into the chat box if anybody has some ideas. Getting lots of reliability. I have to scroll down. Scholarly. Intention, integration, intellect, integrity. Allison's got it so far. Intuition. I love these because so many of these are applicable to this. So it is integrity, scholarly integrity. So as I said, being able to assess whether something really holds up in the realm of academia, something that they read. So that's the analysis piece. And the support, the strength, support, and security in this case come from that focus on information literacy, explicit focus on it. So telling students it's important for you to know how to find good sources and how to find reliable sources, and to know whether something's biased or not, and to look for whether it holds up in the research, in the realm of academic research. So they can compare rhetorical styles, they can distinguish between points and texts that are well supported or poorly supported, and again, academic language, the vocabulary necessary for students to discuss whether something is well supported or not. So so that's the 3 S's for that one, and a technique for this that I thought was very useful, coming from John Goshart's book, is this read or listen with the grain. So if students, to encourage students to have this, to interact with a text more than once, or even a section of a text more than once. The first time reading or listening with the grain, so looking for what in this text is accurate, what is convincing about this text, what examples support the author's claims, and then reading again against the grain. So what might not be accurate, what is not convincing, which examples are missing, which examples and evidence are missing, and where has the author overlooked others' perspectives on this topic or avoided challenges in order to present sort of a biased viewpoint. So that's a technique that can be used readily with students. It's time-consuming to ask them to read, especially if it's a longer text, but if they can extract, if you ahead of time can extract sections for them to do this with, so that they get that they build that habit, can be very useful for them. And again, as I say, make it a habit. So, so doing these kinds of things regularly with students allows them to really build their skills and feel confident in doing it. So let's see, we're moving on to the next. So we've done summarizing, we've done analyzing. If you remember what the next skill or element of critical engagement was, let's see who remembers. This is another quiz. Sorry, my cats are running around. Type in what, if you remember what the next skill is. Let's see. I love seeing all these words you're typing in. It's really great. Opposed. Oh, I'm not seeing it. Oh, evaluating. Ah, here we go. Evaluating create, that's coming later. So evaluating, yes. Thanks, Lynn and Nata and Victoria and Amina and Dr. Amal. Evaluating is the next skill or element. So evaluating, focusing on what? What is that V word? I'll give you a hint. It's right in the middle of the word evaluating. So focusing on values. So for me, this stage, evaluating, is focusing on the values behind a text. So what are the underlying beliefs, or what's driving the author's claims? What personal values does the author have, or cultural values are they bringing into this that have kind of colored the point of view? So in evaluating, students then distinguish between facts and, I'm sure we know this one, facts and opinions. And so they get an opportunity to once again sort of read critically for what is the author interjecting in this, or the speaker interjecting into this text or lecture that is his or her own perspective, as opposed to the facts. And so then they get to examine content in the context of their own values and beliefs. So students then get to compare and think about, well, what do I believe about this? And what does this mean to me? And how does what I've just read or heard affect my opinion or my perspective on this topic? And they get to react and respond to the ideas and express, and we'll do a quiz on this one, express and blank their own opinions. If you can type that S word into the chat box, I'll see who's still with us. Values, well, lots of values there. I missed it. Check those. Suggest, support. Stella says support. Anna says support. Support, lots of support, lots of suggest. So yes, they get to support and suggest their own opinions. I was going for support, but suggest also works. So to really be able to say, I agree, or I disagree, and why do I agree or disagree? So drawing upon their own experiences and their own knowledge and other things that they've read and heard in order to support their own beliefs or opinions in relation to the content. And so the strength and the support and the security here is really hinging a lot on our own material selection. So if we choose materials that are compelling and current and relevant to students, then that draw students into them and make them feel compelled to share their own opinions, then that's the basis for getting to this evaluation piece. We have to choose materials. We have to try to bring materials into the classroom that are going to create that environment and that opportunity for students to react to express their own opinions and respond and react thoughtfully, and to evaluate someone else's opinion in terms of how it relates to their own beliefs. And so, and then also, so targeted work on rhetorical moves. So how did the author draw you into this, to his or her opinion, and how did they, and so what is the structure, how is the content structured? And then, again, academic language. So, so language for disagreeing and agreeing and supporting opinions, and really those kind of higher level vocabulary that allows students to feel, yes, I sound like an expert here. So we really want to build that confidence for students to, those language skills for students to be able to express themselves in a way that that sounds, that has credential, and has, is solid, has solid grounding underneath it. So again, with this evaluation piece, the reading and listening with and against the grain is a technique that can be used. So read once. Where do you agree with the author? Listen once. Where do you agree with the lecture? And then read again. Where do you disagree, and why? And how does the author speaker encourage you to think differently or change your mind about the content? So with so this is where students really get that opportunity to respond thoughtfully. Now here's a quote from John Goshert. This purposeful summary and response process motivates students to break free of simplistic commentary. I liked it, I don't agree, and so on, and express themselves with meaningful, active participation in an academic conversation. Another technique that can be used for this is this 3-column reading log. So giving students the tools to interact with a text, to choose a quotation from the book, or from a lecture that they want to, that makes them think something, and then summarize it, and then write their response to it. So this way they get a chance to, they're keeping a record of their responses to use later. Very effective tool. And again, make it a habit if possible, always having students go through this process. Creating is that expanding on ideas and generating new ones. So this is where students have a chance to take what to solve problems. They learn to take what. If you can type that in, they learn to take, let's see what we have. Yes, Melody initiative, Theodora initiative. Yes, so they take initiative to solve problems. So they've built up this confidence. They've built up this base of knowledge about the content, and then they can take it and apply it and take initiative, and then they can take A based on what they've learned. Similar to initiative. Take action, yes, Daniela. Take action based on what they've learned. And that involves carrying learning beyond the classroom into the RW context, the real world context. So real world tasks, social media, YouTube, for example, or even Facebook or blogging or those kinds of things really allow students to take their ideas to the world. Tasks that focus on social responsibility or making changes to improve their community or their school or their class or the world, those are the things that allow students to expand on the ideas and apply them in a real world context, and having vision for the future so that they can take a traditional idea and expand on it, and kind of the sky's the limit when students are given that license to create and go beyond the classroom. And finally, assuming a position of authority. So we've been talking a lot about this, becoming experts and giving students that license and those credentials to be authorities on the content. This is just I won't go too much into this because we're running short on time here, but this is from Courage to Teach, Parker Palmer, who looks at the teacher kind of as the expert in this traditional model of teaching, and students as amateurs, and that the content, students don't have a direct relationship with the content, which is kind of this object out here that the expert is delivering to the students. But he recommends this community of truth, which I really believe in as students as knowers, giving them that license to be the knowers and to interact with the content as a subject and with each other and have this relationship directly with the content as opposed to our delivering it and their accepting it as at face value. So in summary, those 5 critical engagement skills lead students to this position of authority, and then that cycle allows them to begin there in that position of authority. They have the confidence to take on any content with that feeling as an authority. So finally, in conclusion, I'd say these bridges sometimes have an old sign that say there's a $1 or $2 fine for driving faster than a walk on this bridge. So the point is, take it slow. Don't try to rush students into it, but take time to develop those skills and allow them to develop them and give them that strength, support, and security to be able to do that. So I want to thank you all for joining me today, and I thank Henry. Are you there somewhere? I guess I don't know if there's time for questions, but I'm happy to take some questions.
Hi, Jaimie. Yep, I can hear you here. We've got a little bit of time.
Hi.
If you'd like to answer a few questions
great.
from the chat box, guys. You want to write your questions to Jaimie by the chat box at the bottom now. Jaimie, would you like to pick out a few and then answer those over the mic?
Sure. I'm looking at, so I see one question here. Someone says, are you teaching at the moment? Evgenia, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Actually, I'm not teaching at the moment, unfortunately. I'm really missing teaching at the moment. I'm mostly writing educational materials for the likes of Macmillan. And if you liked this talk, I really hate to do this, but I hope the Macmillan people will appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
If you like this talk, Skillful is Macmillan's new series, academic series. I've written Level 3, co-authored with my friend Jenny Bixby. It's really a wonderful series, and it really brings in a lot of the elements we've talked about today. Let's see if we have some more questions. Oh, here's a long question from Silka. How important do you think prefabricated phrases are? Teach students to watch out for phrases that signal paraphrases, examples. So yes, so signal words and transition words and phrases, I really think they're very important. I don't think that just because they're kind of rote phrases, it diminishes their importance. They really are useful. They're anchors for students to help students understand and navigate texts, and so they are very important. So and teaching them teaching them those transition signal phrases for example, introducing an example or introducing an opinion or introducing or changing to a new topic or digressing. They're very useful. Anything that can help students navigate academic text better and more efficiently and more effectively, we would do them a disservice to keep that from them. So yes, I think that's very important. Thanks for that question. And then I guess maybe one more, Henry. Is that okay?
Yeah, one more will be fine, Jaimie. Yeah.
Okay. So Andres says, do you recommend, where did we go? Sorry, I lost your question, Andres. Do you see it, Henry?
Yep, it says, do you recommend purposely openly planning the use of certain Bloom's thinking skills in your academic writing classes? If so, how?
So recommend planning. I'm sorry, one more time. Do I recommend planning with it? Planning with it?
Yeah, planning with Bloom's thinking skills in your writing classes.
Yes, I recommend planning. Yes, I recommend planning anything with Bloom's taxonomy, and how you do it. I guess depends on what your learning objectives are for the lesson, because that's really what Bloom's taxonomy is focused on. It's focused on learning objectives. So, what are the behaviors that you want students to be able to do? And look at that Bloom's taxonomy and those verbs. Do you want them to be able to agree, to understand and expand upon an idea, and so of course the Bloom's taxonomy is huge. There's so much to it, so it's almost impossible to use the whole thing in any lesson. It is impossible. So think about what your objectives are for the lesson, and then look at it and pull out the verbs, and then think about which activities in my lesson will allow students to interact with the material in that way. And it's very useful. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, excellent, Jaimie. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do that. And thank you for your wonderful presentation too, and the lovely images that you've shared today as well.
Oh.
One of the more creative ones I've seen.
Great.
So would you like to just say a few words to thank everyone and say goodbye to the people in the webinar today who've come along?
Yes, thank all of you so much for making this also a very enjoyable experience for me, and all of your participation and your great ideas. And I'm sorry if I missed a question or I missed a comment. I would love to have you all sitting with me here in my living room. So maybe next time. But thank you very much again. And thank you, Henry. And
no problem, Jaimie. Thanks to you. Thanks to you too. And I'm sorry I got the wrong place that you live in.
That's okay.
I've learned a lot today about geography. I'll remember next time. I'll know for sure.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm just going to make a few announcements about the certificates and things. But Jaimie, thanks again for coming and holding the talk. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye.